Welcome to Switchboard. This is a space for the inner workings to become external. I am your host, a plural creator. I'm navigating life, art, a chronic sense of existentialism, and the absolute nuances of dissociative identity disorder. This podcast blends poetry, internal monologues, and my life as a system of 65. This is a channel for deep listening and unfiltered rambling. Today's episode is titled Selecting the Wood. This is the very first stage of carving the Russian doll. Before we begin, let's go on a journey. Wherever you are, if you can, close your eyes and imagine. It's London, the early 2000s. The air is damp and heavy. It smells of old concrete, wet asphalt, and petrol fumes from the streets below. But you are looking at this world from the bottom up, a bird's eye view. You are tiny, barely out of the womb. You are looking out from a pram or a low window. The world outside is a blur of grey brick. Neon shop lights reflect in rain puddles. A constant low-frequency rumble of double-decker buses rattles the glass. You hear the sharp hiss of air brakes. Muffled shouts echo down a concrete stairwell. Sirens wail in the distance. Inside is a contrast of textures. The scratchy nylon of a pram hood, the cold drought coming under a door, the distant rhythmic ticking of an old radiator trying to keep the damp out. This is the raw wood. This is where it begins. Take a deep breath and step inside the first line with me. Reincarnation through unconsensual disposal. I twist awake, aware my existence was a painful mistake. She reveals the mask that was made of me. She would use to conceal herself from her enemy. She smears my striking red tint on her lips. What could go wrong? She said as her hand slips. Her shiny new lipstick was mashed to a pulp, smudged on the carpet, her first murder, full scope. She scoops me back up. Money was tight. She needed my guard to mask her long night. The more you use me, the more I'm won. One day the tube's empty. I'm hollow all through. I was too young to remember the blue. She leaves me in a car, but leaves behind a huge scar. My new owner grabs me with lust, and I knew there and then, use me he must. He flees away on a spree to remodel me into what he saw I could be. He flattens the lipstick and hammers away, slashing and crashing his anger all day. I was no longer a lipstick to uphold a mask. I was a doll, nothing but a cast. My full body cast was itchy and rough, but the times you would hurt me made me feel so tough. I was recycled plastic, new and refreshed. But under my new body still lay the first mess. Soon he realized he didn't want me like that. And so he chucked me away, and that's how I would stay. I was grabbed by authority, chucked with the majority. The recycling heap was my new place to weep. I was painted with pink, washed off and new, but still my skin was a deep dark blue. I hurt many people with my sharp, unpolished edges, and stamped on other children with my new, shiny wedges. Soon, someone caught sight of me. That's when I knew they found a spot fit. That's where I would be. Then I was tamed and tied in a bow, but still, deep inside, I just carried such sorrow. These new clothes were too tight, and the lights were all too bright. And that upset my nan, and so she fled in the night. I've been recycled many times, more times than I could even rhyme. I'm plastered with layers, all made of newspapers. Each layer holds another story waiting to unfold. I've lived so many lives, and they all sit inside me, boiling and bubbling, some cowering, some hiding. I wrote this poem at a very difficult time in my life. I think I was about 17 years old, maybe 18 years old. I was not doing well. The internalized trauma, the anger, the rage, the non-conformity, and the passion, it was all so rampant. This was my first time being a teenager. At 17 years old, you would expect that, I'd had that pretty much at the end of my teenage years, but no. This was when my teenage years started for me. And so yes, I was very, very angsty. I wrote a lot of poetry like this. But this piece is one of my favourite in my collection, and so we're going to go through it line by line, and I'm going to explain everything. I'm going to give you some lore to go with the rhymes and the metaphors that whoever wrote this put together. I twist awake, aware my existence was a painful mistake. So one thing that is very difficult for me about surviving trauma from infancy is that, unlike my later traumas, therapy doesn't guarantee that I will ever remember these things. In fact, I will never remember these things. And that bothers me. And I know that might sound strange. Personally, I yearn for these trauma memories. Obviously, they're very, very disturbing. They're destabilizing, they're uncomfortable. But I want to know what happened to me. I want to know every detail. I want to remember the faces. I want to remember the words and the arguments. And I want to remember every single line, every single image. I want to read it like a book. And I think that stems from my neurodivergent processing methods of I'm a very visual and literal thinker. I need to know every detail so that I can begin to process, because if I miss a detail, I could be remembering it wrong, or I might not know the right story. If I don't know every detail, if I don't know the scene from every angle, if I don't know every aspect of the scene doesn't feel accurate to me. And not accurate doesn't feel truthful. And so this is why these parts of my trauma are particularly aggravating. And so yes, I twist awake, aware my existence was a painful mistake. Let's get back onto that line. So, I was born as a result of assault to my mother. That in itself makes me very angry, very angry. And so I feel like that kind of pain that my mum would have suffered to conceive me would have been digested into my very DNA. It would have been built into the pregnancy. That stress and the post-traumatic pain that my mum would have felt would have been ingrained into me as I was being built. As my body was forming and my brain was forming, I would have felt my mum's pain, and that would have been digested in every meal that I had through being in my mum's stomach. And so this is why I referenced that in my first line. This poem takes you from the womb to my last placement. I had 37 placements whilst I was a child before the age of 16. My longest placement lasted 3 years, so for my entire life I didn't stay anywhere for longer than 3 years, and I still don't think I have. So I wanted to include that body awareness of the pain and that that prenatal pain and that prenatal trauma, because that's a very big part of how I think about my trauma history. She reveals the mask that was made of me. So my mum was being pimped, London 2000s, early 2000s. I was her mask. I was her protection in a way. A mother with a baby is harder to hurt than a single woman, a young woman. And so, yeah, I was a mask. I was a tool, and that upsets me in a way. That's a very multi-layered experience of pain, because I don't feel anger at my mum, but I feel anger that my first use wasn't to be loved or protected. It was to protect. She would use to conceal from her enemy the enemy. The enemy is obvious here. She smears my striking red tint on her lips. So this is the red lipstick. The red lipstick is not even something I associate with my actual mum, but red lipstick is something I associate with that kind of female rage, even gender non-conforming rage. I do love a red lipstick, but you know, that female rage and that kind of sassiness and that fire and sexy colour sort of thing. And so, you know, that was how I felt. And well, not felt, because I wasn't really conscious, but this is how I feel now. This kind of shiny lipstick that was there as kind of a guard. What could go wrong, she said, as her hand slips. You know, the clumsiness, you know. Obviously, you know, within this era there would have been drinking and drugs involved, and you know, this is just a small kind of nod towards that clumsiness that would have happened in my early caregiving. Her shiny new lipstick was mashed to a pulp, smudged on the carpet, her first murder full scope. You know, this, to me, it signifies this era, and how this era ended for me signifies my first death. For me, a lot of the time I process my major traumatic events as almost an ego death, or some kind of conscious death, the end of one timeline that could have been, and the start of a new timeline laced with pain and built with pain. This was my first death. She scoops me back up. Money was tight. She needed my guard to mask her long night. This again is a nod to, you know, the kind of situation my mum was in. Money was tight, and she needed her guard, so she had to keep using me for it. The more you use me, the more I am worn, and you know, this is just that hollow feeling of being a tool for something rather than being here for love and protection like you're supposed to be as an infant. One day the tube is empty, I'm hollow all through. I was too young to remember the blue. She leaves me in the car, but leaves behind a huge scar. My new owner grabs me with lust, and I knew there and then, use me he must. So this era signifies the first big recognized trauma. At 3 months old, I was kidnapped and sexually assaulted within that period, which is when I actually contracted HPV as a result of the abuse. So these lines are very self-explanatory. Lee's away on a spree. That was me being kidnapped to remodel me into what he saw I could be, and you know, seeing the potential in this vulnerable, unprotected infant. And my God, did they see potential. So I was no longer a lipstick used to uphold a mask. And you know, the hammering and slashing and crashing, the pure rage and the toxically masculine rage, the patriarchal rage at this tiny infant. And I felt that, and I digested that. I was a doll, nothing but a cast. My full body cast was itchy and rough, and you know, the pain and the anger that was digested into me, the pain and the anger that built this new version of me that had to be alive and had to be created for my survival, was very angry, very rough. It hurt me, it hurt others, And that is just the digested pain of how violently and aggressively was kind of tied into this era. I was recycled plastic, new and refreshed, and this is where I introduced plastic as a metaphor. Now, plastic, I fucking hate plastic. Let's be real, it's killing our earth. So, you know, plastic is awful. It lets off microplastics. It's everywhere. Landfills are full of it. It's in every home. I'm recording on a mic that's made of plastic, with a laptop made of plastic and a mouse made of plastic on a desk made of plastic. Plastic is everywhere. It's a silent corrupter and a silent killer. It's in our bodies. You know, plastic pollution has become so intense that human beings have plastic in their brains, which, yeah. And so this is where the plastic metaphor comes from. We see things wrapped in plastic every single bloody day. And, you know, we think nothing of it. We just think, oh, I'm going to go get my biscuits or my chocolate and my dinner from this plastic. And, you know, we don't think about the pollution. We don't think about the fact that that's going to be on this earth for probably hundreds of years. And this is the subtle kind of metaphor that I'm trying to impose here. And soon he realised he didn't want me like that. He chucked me away, that's how I'd stay. I was grabbed by authority, chucked with the majority. So this was when I eventually got taken into care, obviously. Bound to happen. So the recycling heap, again, the plastic themes that I feel very intensely. I was painted with pink, washed off and new, but still my skin was a deep dark blue. The painted with pink is a play on the forced femininity of my childhood. It was so forced, and I'm a transgender man, for those of you that don't know. I have never been a woman, I will never be a woman, and I was just unfortunate enough to be born in the body of a woman. But this femininity was very forced upon me as a child, and that was something that was quite traumatic for me emotionally. And so being painted pink is a major theme throughout my poetry, because I was never, you know, the pink versus blue, boys and girls, and, you know, the kind of gender constructs of colours. It's a very prominent feature in my poetry, because it's ridiculous, and which is why I reference it so much. You know, painted with the pink, because that's all everything is. Anything associated with one gender or the other is bullshit. You're painting over something that, you know, was just a natural hue. I'm plastered with layers made of newspapers. Each layer holds another story waiting to unfold. I've lived so many lives, and they all sit inside me, boiling and bubbling, some cowering and hiding. So this is a direct nod towards dissociative identities. So towards the end of this poem, I'm an adult, or at least in my late teens, and, you know, we go straight from my infancy all the way through my childhood, my teens, to the present day. This is a nod towards all of us that lay within this kind of vessel, plastered with stories and hopes and dreams and interests and hobbies and names and ages. You know, we are all complex. We are all with, you know, individual, separate, but equally interesting plots, you know. Yeah, that piece is very intense for me and for my system. You know, it's the foundation. It's the foundation of what created now. It's the bare bones of abuse. The poem mostly focuses on a theme of being disposed of, being recycled, being grabbed, being chucked, being abandoned, being supported. And it's very much the foundations for my abuse. It's the very much core, the start, the beginning, the selecting, the wood, so to speak. And that is where we stop carving for today. We have selected the wood. We've looked at the raw grain, at the direction of the grain, the natural patterns, and where this system started. To understand the wood, we have to let it rest. Look at it, fresh eyes, another day. Thank you for tuning into this line. Thank you for deep listening. Thank you for sitting with the static. In our next episode, we move to the next layer of the doll, the rough shape. We will explore my mid-childhood, early internal changes and the shifting dynamics of our system. If this space resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel. Leave a comment below with the thoughts or lines that stayed with you today. Until the next time, this is Switchboard, hanging up the line.